The words my 8-year-old grandson whispered to me at his birthday party changed everything I thought I knew about my own family. "Grandpa Vincent, they're planning to take your money tonight." His small voice trembled as he tugged at my sleeve, chocolate cake still smeared on his chin. I knelt down to his level, thinking he'd overheard some adult conversation about gifts or party expenses. But when little Marcus looked around nervously and pointed toward the kitchen where my daughter-in-law Sandra was deep in conversation with my nephew Kevin, I realized this wasn't about party planning. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The autumn air carried the scent of burning leaves as children ran through my backyard, their laughter mixing with the sound of adults chatting over coffee and leftover birthday cake. Marcus had just turned 8, and Sandra had insisted on throwing the party at my house in Millbrook rather than their cramped apartment in the city. At 72, I welcomed the chaos of family gatherings in my old Victorian home. The house felt too quiet most days since Eleanor passed 3 years ago. I'd been watching Marcus unwrap his final gift when he abandoned the remote-controlled car and made his way over to where I stood by the oak tree Eleanor and I had planted 40 years earlier. His face carried that serious expression children get when they're processing adult conversations they're not supposed to understand. "What money are they talking about, Marcus?" I asked gently, glancing toward the kitchen window where Sandra's animated gestures suggested an intense discussion with Kevin. My nephew had arrived late to the party, claiming work had kept him busy. Kevin managed my investment portfolio and handled most of my financial affairs since my arthritis made paperwork difficult. "Mommy was on the phone this morning," Marcus whispered, his 8-year-old voice barely audible over the party noise. "She didn't know I was listening. She said tonight was the night and Uncle Kevin had all the papers ready. She said you wouldn't even know what happened until it was too late." My stomach tightened. Sandra had been unusually attentive lately, suggesting I update my will, recommending Kevin handle more of my financial decisions, even offering to help me organize my important documents. I'd attributed her sudden interest to concern for my advancing age and recent memory lapses that had everyone worried. "What papers, buddy?" I kept my voice casual, not wanting to alarm him further. "The ones in Uncle Kevin's briefcase, the ones that make Daddy and Mommy get all your money when you're sleeping tonight." Marcus looked up at me with those innocent brown eyes that reminded me so much of his father at that age. "Grandpa, are you going somewhere tonight? Are you sick?" The implications hit me like a physical blow. My grandson thought they were planning to hurt me, that tonight meant something permanent. But as I processed his words, another possibility emerged: power of attorney documents. If Kevin had prepared papers giving Sandra and my son Robert complete control over my finances, they could theoretically clean out my accounts without my knowledge or consent. "No, Marcus, Grandpa's not going anywhere." I hugged him close, my mind racing. "Tell me exactly what you heard Mommy say on the phone." Marcus scrunched his face in concentration. "She said the bank opens early tomorrow, and by the time you wake up, everything would be moved to the safe account. She said Uncle Kevin promised it would look like you asked for it yourself." Bank transfers. They were planning to move my money tonight, probably using forged documents or fraudulent power of attorney papers. The safe account likely meant an account in their names, possibly offshore or hidden where I couldn't easily trace it. I glanced toward the kitchen again. Sandra caught my eye and waved, her smile bright and innocent. She was a beautiful woman, 10 years younger than my son Robert, with the kind of charm that had initially won over our entire family when Robert brought her home 5 years ago. But lately, I'd noticed subtle changes. Questions about my estate planning, suggestions that I was becoming forgetful, gentle pushing towards making Robert and her my official financial representatives. "Marcus, this is very important," I said, crouching down to his level. "Did you hear anything about papers I'm supposed to sign tonight?" He nodded eagerly. After the party, Mommy's going to give you special medicine to help you sleep better. She said you've been having trouble sleeping since Grandma Eleanor went to heaven. Then Uncle Kevin comes over with the papers and you sign them while you're sleepy and everything gets better for everyone. Special medicine. They were planning to drug me, get me into a compromised mental state where I'd sign documents without understanding their full implications. The legal system would see my signature on power of attorney documents, assume I'd made informed decisions about my financial future, and by morning, my life savings would be transferred to accounts controlled by Sandra and Robert. "Grandpa, are you mad?" Marcus touched my arm with concern. "I didn't mean to tell secrets." "You did exactly the right thing, buddy." I pulled him close again, my heart racing with a mixture of rage and gratitude. This innocent child had just saved me from financial ruin orchestrated by his own parents. "You're the smartest, bravest boy I know." The party continued around us, but everything felt different now. I watched Sandra laughing with the other mothers, watched Robert manning the grill with practiced ease, watched Kevin checking his watch repeatedly. They all looked so normal, so loving, so concerned about family patriarch's well-being. But underneath their performance, they were counting down hours until they could execute their plan. I needed information, and I needed it fast. If they planned to move money tonight, I had perhaps 4 or 5 hours before banks opened in different time zones, before international transfers could be completed, before my life's work disappeared into accounts I couldn't access. "Marcus, I need you to do something very important for me," I said quietly. "When you go inside, I want you to play near the kitchen where Mommy and Uncle Kevin are talking. Listen to anything they say about papers or banks or Grandpa. Can you do that without them knowing?" He nodded solemnly, understanding the gravity despite his age. "Like a spy mission?" "Exactly like a spy mission, the most important spy mission ever." Marcus scampered toward the house with renewed purpose. I remained by Eleanor's oak tree watching my family through different eyes. 47 years I'd spent building my construction company from a single truck to a regional operation employing over 200 people. I'd sold the business 3 years ago for $12 million, invested carefully, lived modestly. My estate was worth nearly $15 million, money I'd planned to leave primarily to Robert and Marcus, with generous provisions for Sandra despite never fully warming to her. But apparently, they'd decided not to wait for inheritance. My phone buzzed, naturally.
"Dad Vincent? Staying for dinner? Making your favorite pot roast? You look tired. Early bedtime tonight?" The message felt different now, loaded with sinister implications. She was confirming I'd be staying, probably ensuring I'd be here for whatever they'd planned for later. The mention of tiredness and early bedtime suggested they wanted me relaxed and unsuspecting when the special medicine made its appearance. I typed back, "Sounds wonderful, sweetheart. Looking forward to relaxing tonight." If they wanted to play games, I could play along while gathering intelligence. But I also needed help, someone I could trust completely. My mind went to Thomas Chen, my old business partner who'd retired the same time I did. Thomas had always been the cautious one, the planner, the man who thought 3 steps ahead of everyone else. He'd also maintained connections with private investigators and legal professionals from our construction days when we'd occasionally dealt with fraud and embezzlement. I walked to the far corner of my property, away from party noise and prying ears, and dialed Thomas's number. "Vincent, how's the birthday boy enjoying his party?" Thomas's voice carried its usual warmth. "Thomas, I need your help with something urgent. Can't discuss it over the phone. How quickly can you get to my house in Millbrook?" The tone of my voice must have conveyed the seriousness. 30 minutes. What do you need me to bring? Your investigator contacts? A lawyer you trust completely, and maybe someone who understands financial fraud. This is bigger than anything we dealt with in business. Vincent, are you safe right now?" I looked back toward my house, where my family continued their elaborate charade of love and concern. "For now, but that changes tonight. I'm leaving immediately. Don't do anything until I get there." 45 minutes later, Thomas arrived with 2 companions. He'd driven directly to my house, but parked 3 blocks away, approaching through the wooded area behind my property. I met them at Eleanor's old garden shed, away from curious family members. "Vincent, meet Patricia Walsh," Thomas said, indicating a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s. "She's a forensic accountant who specializes in financial elder abuse. And this is James Rodriguez, private investigator with 20 years' experience in family fraud cases." Patricia shook my hand firmly. Thomas explained the basic situation during the drive. "Your family is planning to defraud you tonight using forged power of attorney documents?" "That's my understanding, based on what my 8-year-old grandson overheard. They plan to drug me, get my signature on legal documents while I'm impaired, then transfer my assets to accounts they control." James Rodriguez pulled out a small recording device. "We need to document everything they're planning. With your permission, I'd like to place listening devices in areas where they're likely to discuss specifics. My house is full of family right now, birthday party for my grandson." "Perfect cover," Patricia noted. "They won't suspect surveillance during a family gathering. James can place devices while you keep them distracted." I felt a mixture of excitement and revulsion. Excitement at taking control of the situation, revulsion at the necessity of spying on my own family. But Marcus's innocent warning had saved me from complete financial ruin. I owed it to him and to Eleanor's memory to protect what we'd built together. "What do you need from me?" I asked. James outlined the plan. "Act completely normal, stay for dinner as they've planned. If they offer you medication or anything to drink that seems unusual, accept it but don't actually consume it. We need evidence of their intent to impair your judgment." Patricia added, "Meanwhile, I'll be running background checks on Sandra and Kevin, looking for previous financial irregularities, other potential victims, offshore account activity. If this is their first fraud attempt, we'll handle it one way. If they're experienced criminals, we'll need a different approach." The plan felt surreal, like something from a crime drama rather than my quiet retirement reality. But as I watched my family through the kitchen window, Sandra checking her watch while Kevin opened his briefcase at my dining room table, I realized they'd forced this situation. "There's one more thing," I said. "My grandson Marcus is the one who warned me. I asked him to keep listening for more information. He's 8 years old." Thomas's expression darkened. "They're planning to defraud their own child's grandfather on his birthday?" "Apparently so." James checked his recording equipment. "Children make excellent witnesses because they report exactly what they hear without adult interpretation. If Marcus can provide more specific details about timing or methods, it could be crucial evidence." We spent 20 minutes setting up surveillance equipment throughout my house. James worked with professional efficiency, placing tiny recording devices in the kitchen, dining room, and living room where family discussions typically occurred. Patricia connected wirelessly to my home internet, beginning her investigation into Sandra and Kevin's financial backgrounds. "Vincent, one question," Patricia said as she typed rapidly on her laptop. "Have you noticed any recent changes in your bank statements, credit reports, or legal documents? I haven't been paying close attention lately. Kevin handles most of my financial reviews, brings me summaries quarterly." Her fingers paused over the keyboard. "That could be a problem. If Kevin's been managing your finances and is part of this conspiracy, he might have already begun preliminary preparation, fake documents, duplicate accounts, staged financial records." The implications were staggering. Kevin had been handling my investments for 2 years. He had access to account numbers, signatures, financial institution contacts. If he'd been planning this fraud for months, he could have already established fraudulent accounts in my name or created legal documents that would pass casual inspection. How do we check without alerting him? "I have contacts at major financial institutions. Give me your account information and I can verify current balances and recent activity without going through Kevin." I provided account details for my primary checking, savings, and investment accounts. Patricia's investigation would take time, but her preliminary checks might reveal whether this conspiracy had already begun. Meanwhile, James prepared me for the evening ahead. "They'll probably wait until after other family members leave. Create a quiet, intimate setting where you feel relaxed and trusting. The drug will likely be something subtle, mixed with food or drink you'd normally consume.
When they present documents for signature, they'll frame it as routine estate planning or minor financial housekeeping. What if I refuse to sign? They'll probably pressure you gently at first, emphasize family security, mention concerns about your memory or decision-making ability. If pressure doesn't work, they might increase the drug dosage or become more aggressive. Thomas, who'd been listening quietly, spoke up. "Vincent, if this gets dangerous, we're calling police immediately. I don't care about evidence or legal prosecution. Your safety comes first." Looking back toward my house, where my family continued their performance of normalcy, I felt a strange combination of sadness and determination. Eleanor and I had dreamed of leaving our wealth to future generations, ensuring Marcus could attend college, that Robert and Sandra could buy a house, that everyone we loved would have financial security. Instead, they'd chosen betrayal and fraud. "All right," I said, straightening my shoulders. "Let's see exactly what they have planned for tonight." The next phase would require the performance of my life, pretending complete ignorance while documenting their criminal conspiracy. But first, I needed to check on Marcus and see what additional intelligence my 8-year-old spy had gathered during his reconnaissance mission. Walking back toward the party, I felt Eleanor's presence strongly, as if she were guiding me through this crisis. She'd always been the better judge of character, had expressed quiet reservations about Sandra from the beginning. I'd dismissed her concerns as protectiveness, unwillingness to share her son with another woman. Now I wished I'd listened more carefully to Eleanor's instincts about people. The birthday party was winding down, other families gathering children and heading home as afternoon shadows lengthened. I found Marcus in the living room, playing quietly with his new remote-controlled car while keeping one eye on the kitchen where Sandra and Kevin remained deep in conversation. "How's the spy mission going, buddy?" I asked quietly. Marcus looked around to ensure no adults were listening. "Uncle Kevin has lots of papers in his briefcase. Mommy said the bank lady already prepared everything and they just need your signature to make it official. She said after tonight, Daddy won't have to worry about money anymore." Bank lady? They had inside help at my financial institution, someone who'd prepared fraudulent documents in advance. This conspiracy involved more people than just Sandra and Kevin. "Did you hear the bank lady's name?" "Mrs. Patterson, I think. Mommy said Mrs. Patterson promised everything would look completely normal." Patricia needed this information immediately. If someone at my bank was involved in preparing fraudulent documents, she could investigate that angle while gathering evidence about tonight's planned fraud. "Marcus, you've been incredibly helpful. Now I need you to keep playing normally, but if you hear anything else about papers or banks or Mrs. Patterson, remember it and tell Grandpa later. Can you do that?" He nodded seriously. "Grandpa, are Mommy and Daddy trying to steal from you?" The directness of the question caught me off guard. Children understood situations more clearly than adults often realized. "I think they might be, buddy, but Grandpa's going to make sure they don't succeed." "Good. Stealing is wrong, even if it's family." Out of the mouths of babes, my 8-year-old grandson had better moral clarity than his parents. I walked outside and called Patricia with the bank information Marcus had provided. Her investigation would now include Mrs. Patterson and potential inside help at my financial institution. "Vincent, this is bigger than family fraud," Patricia said after I'd relayed Marcus's intelligence. "If bank employees are involved in preparing false documents, we're looking at institutional financial crime. The FBI might need to be involved. Let's focus on tonight first. Can we gather enough evidence to stop them and protect my assets?" "Absolutely. James has the recording equipment ready. I'm documenting their backgrounds and financial activities. By tomorrow morning, we'll have everything needed for criminal prosecution and civil asset recovery." The plan felt solid, but I still needed to endure several more hours of family performance while they prepared to drug and defraud me. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd spend my grandson's birthday party documenting his parents' criminal conspiracy. As the last party guests departed, Sandra began clearing dishes while Robert started cleaning the grill outside. The intimacy of family cleanup time provided perfect cover for private conversations about their evening plans. I settled into Eleanor's favorite armchair with a cup of coffee, positioning myself where I could observe everyone while the hidden recording devices captured their discussions. The next few hours would determine whether my family faced criminal charges or whether they succeeded in stealing my life's work. Marcus climbed onto my lap with his new birthday book, a collection of adventure stories about brave children solving mysteries. The parallel to our own situation wasn't lost on me. "Read to me, Grandpa?" Marcus asked. "Of course, buddy. Let's read about children who save the day."
As I opened the book, Sandra appeared with a fresh cup of coffee for me. "Dad Vincent, you look tired. This has been a big day. Maybe you should take it easy tonight. Get some rest." "Actually, I'm feeling quite energetic," I replied, accepting the coffee but not drinking it. "Looking forward to a nice, quiet evening with family." Her smile seemed forced. "Well, we'll make sure you're comfortable." The coffee smelled normal, but I wouldn't be taking any chances. While Marcus listened to his adventure story, I discreetly poured the coffee into Eleanor's Boston Fern when Sandra wasn't looking. Phase 1 of their plan had just been attempted. The special medicine Marcus had overheard was probably already dissolved in my coffee cup. Now I needed to pretend the drug was taking effect while staying alert enough to document their criminal conspiracy. The real performance was just beginning. As evening approached and shadows grew longer across my property, I noticed Kevin making frequent phone calls in private corners of my house. Each conversation seemed to increase his confidence, and I caught fragments suggesting coordination with outside conspirators. "Everything's ready on this end," I heard him say during one call near the front hallway. "Papers are perfect. Vincent won't suspect anything unusual. Transfer can happen as soon as we get signatures." Sandra, meanwhile, kept offering me food and drinks, each time expressing concern about my energy level and suggesting I should rest soon. When I declined her offerings, she became more persistent, almost aggressive in her supposed care for my well-being. "Dad Vincent, you barely touched your dinner. Are you feeling all right? You seem different tonight, maybe confused about things." The gaslighting had begun. They needed to establish that I appeared mentally impaired, possibly to justify their later claims that I'd signed documents willingly but wasn't mentally competent to understand their implications. "I feel fine, Sandra, actually quite sharp tonight." Her frustration was barely concealed. "Well, you know how you've been forgetting things lately. Robert and I have been worried about your memory." Robert nodded on cue. "Dad, remember last month when you couldn't find your car keys, or when you forgot about our dinner plans?" Incidents I'd attributed to normal aging were being reframed as evidence of mental incompetence. They were building a narrative to support their fraud, creating justification for taking control of my finances. Marcus, still curled up beside me, whispered quietly, "Grandpa, you found your keys in the refrigerator because Mommy put them there. I saw her." My blood ran cold. Sandra had been deliberately creating situations to make me appear forgetful, setting up scenarios where I'd seem mentally incompetent. This conspiracy was more sophisticated and long-term than I'd initially realized. "Thank you for telling me that, Marcus," I whispered back. As the evening progressed, Kevin's briefcase remained prominently positioned on my dining room table, and he'd begun organizing papers in preparation for whatever documents they planned to have me sign. The recordings James had placed throughout my house would be capturing every word. At precisely 9 o'clock, Kevin announced it was time for important family business. The moment of truth had arrived. Kevin cleared his throat and gestured toward his briefcase with practiced authority. "Vincent, before we settle in for the evening, there are some important documents we should review. Just routine financial housekeeping, nothing too complicated." Sandra positioned herself beside my chair, her hand resting gently on my shoulder in what anyone observing would consider a loving gesture. But I could feel the tension in her fingers, the controlled pressure that suggested she was ready to hold me in place if necessary. "Dad, Vincent, Kevin's been working so hard to organize everything for you. He says it'll just take a few minutes, and then you can rest properly." Her voice carried that patronizing tone people use with elderly relatives they consider mentally diminished. Robert stood near the front window, presumably keeping watch for unexpected visitors. The coordination between them revealed extensive planning, rehearsal. They'd choreographed this entire evening, assigned roles, prepared for various contingencies. Marcus remained curled against my side, his presence both comforting and heartbreaking. My grandson was witnessing his parents orchestrate a criminal conspiracy against his grandfather, though he probably didn't understand the full implications of what was unfolding. "What kind of documents, Kevin?" I asked, feigning mild interest while internally cataloging every detail for the recording devices James had planted throughout the room. Kevin opened his briefcase with deliberate ceremony, withdrawing a folder thick with official-looking paperwork. Power of attorney forms, mainly. Given some of the memory concerns Sandra and Robert have mentioned, we thought it would be wise to establish clear authorization for financial decision-making. The euphemistic language was carefully chosen. Memory concerns rather than mental incompetence. Financial decision-making rather than complete asset control. They were building a legal narrative that would justify their actions if anyone questioned the documents later. "I haven't noticed any memory problems," I said calmly. Sandra's grip on my shoulder tightened. "Dad, Vincent, remember what we discussed earlier, the incidents with your car keys, forgotten appointments, confusion about dates? It's nothing to be ashamed of. Everyone experiences these things as they get older." Her gaslighting continued, referencing manufactured evidence of mental decline. But Marcus's earlier revelation about Sandra deliberately hiding my keys showed the calculated nature of their manipulation. Kevin spread several documents across my coffee table, positioning them where I'd have to lean forward to read properly. These forms simply authorize Robert and Sandra to handle banking transactions, investment decisions, and routine financial management. You maintain complete ownership of all assets. Think of them as your financial representatives. The language was designed to sound reassuring, non-threatening, but power of attorney documents would give them legal authority to access my accounts, transfer funds, liquidate investments, essentially control my entire financial life without my daily oversight. "Why the urgency tonight?" I asked. "Couldn't this wait until tomorrow when I could review everything properly with my own attorney?" Kevin and Sandra exchanged glances. They hadn't expected resistance to their timeline.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
"Well, Vincent, there are some time-sensitive investment opportunities," Kevin explained smoothly. "Market conditions that might not last past tomorrow. Having proper authorization in place would allow us to act quickly on your behalf. More justification for immediate action. They needed my signature tonight because their fraud scheme required rapid execution before I could involve outside legal counsel or financial advisors." Robert spoke up from his position near the window. "Dad, Kevin's been managing your portfolio successfully for 2 years. This just formalizes the arrangement, makes everything more efficient." The peer pressure was mounting. Family members I'd trusted were presenting a united front, making my hesitation seem unreasonable or paranoid. But I knew Thomas, Patricia, and James were monitoring everything through the surveillance equipment, documenting every element of their criminal conspiracy. "Let me look at these documents more carefully," I said, reaching for the papers. Kevin quickly intervened. "Vincent, the legal language is quite complex. Why don't I explain the key provisions while you follow along?" He didn't want me reading the documents thoroughly. The forms probably contained broader authorization than he was verbally describing, possibly including powers to sell property, modify beneficiaries, or transfer assets internationally. Sandra leaned closer, her voice dropping to an intimate whisper. "Dad, Vincent, you seem tense tonight.
Maybe some chamomile tea would help you relax before handling paperwork. Another attempt to drug me. They were persistent, trying different approaches to impair my mental state before document signing. I'm fine, Sandra, actually quite alert. Her frustration was becoming visible. The drugs they'd attempted to slip into my coffee hadn't taken effect, and my refusal of additional beverages was disrupting their timeline. Kevin tried a different approach. Vincent, I understand your caution. Financial decisions require careful consideration. But Sandra and Robert are genuinely worried about your ability to manage complex investments independently. The subtle threat was clear. Sign these documents voluntarily, or they'd pursue legal guardianship proceedings based on claims of mental incompetence. Marcus shifted against my side, and I caught his eye briefly. My brave little spy looked worried, sensing the growing tension even if he didn't understand the legal implications. "Grandpa," Marcus said quietly, "are these the papers Uncle Kevin was talking about on the phone? The ones that make Mommy and Daddy get your money?" The innocent question struck like a thunderbolt. Sandra's face went pale, and Kevin's confident demeanor cracked slightly. "Marcus, sweetie, these are boring grown-up papers," Sandra said quickly. "Why don't you go play in your room for a while?" But Marcus had already revealed crucial information for the recording devices. His childish interpretation of their conversations would provide clear evidence of their fraudulent intent. "Actually, Marcus can stay," I said firmly. "This is his inheritance we're discussing. He should understand how family finances work." Kevin was visibly uncomfortable now. Children's presence complicated criminal conspiracies, because kids ask direct questions and provide honest observations that could expose adult deceptions. "Vincent, perhaps we should discuss this privately," Kevin suggested. "No need for privacy with family," I replied. "Marcus is mature for his age. He can learn about financial responsibility." Sandra tried to regain control of the situation. "Dad, Vincent, you're being unnecessarily difficult about routine paperwork. Kevin's just trying to help organize things properly." The accusation of being difficult was another manipulation tactic. Frame my reasonable caution as stubborn irrationality, make me seem like the problem for questioning their demands. "I'd like to call my attorney tomorrow morning and review these documents with him before signing anything," I said. Kevin's mask slipped further. "Vincent, that's really not necessary. I am an attorney, and I've prepared everything according to standard legal practices." But Kevin specialized in criminal defense, not estate planning or elder law. His expertise lay in defending people accused of crimes, not in creating legitimate financial documents for elderly clients. "Different attorneys have different specialties," I noted. "I'd prefer someone who focuses specifically on estate planning." Robert moved away from the window, approaching with visible agitation. "Dad, you're making this way more complicated than it needs to be. Kevin's family, we're trying to help you." The family loyalty argument was their final pressure tactic. Make me feel guilty for not trusting relatives. Paint my caution as betrayal of family bonds. If you're trying to help me, you won't mind waiting until I can get proper legal advice. Sandra's composure finally cracked. "Dad, Vincent, we don't have time for delays. Kevin has already coordinated with the bank, prepared all the documentation, arranged everything for tomorrow morning. You're being selfish and unreasonable." The admission was exactly what Patricia needed to hear through the recording devices. Sandra had just confirmed that Kevin had coordinated with bank employees, that documentation was prepared in advance, and that they had specific plans for tomorrow morning. Kevin shot Sandra a warning look, realizing she'd revealed too much. But the damage was done. Their conspiracy was now documented in their own words. "Which bank employee are you working with?" I asked innocently. "That's not important," Kevin said quickly. "Just routine coordination." But Marcus, bless his honest heart, piped up again. "Mrs. Patterson at the bank, right, Mommy? The lady you talked to about Grandpa's money?"
Sandra looked like she wanted to disappear. Her 8-year-old son had just identified their inside accomplice for the surveillance equipment. Kevin stood abruptly, beginning to pace. The evening wasn't proceeding according to plan.
I hadn't consumed enough drugs to impair my judgment, wasn't signing documents without question, and was asking too many specific questions about their arrangements. "Vincent, I think you're overthinking this situation," Kevin said with forced calm. "Power of attorney documents are standard estate planning tools. Most people your age have them in place." The ageist assumption was supposed to make me feel abnormal for not already having such documents, create social pressure to conform to perceived expectations. "Eleanor and I managed our finances independently for 50 years, I replied. "We never needed other people making decisions for us." "But Eleanor's gone now," Sandra said with fake sympathy, "and you're not getting any younger. What happens if you have a medical emergency, or if your memory problems get worse? Robert and I would be helpless to manage your affairs." They were painting a picture of future incompetence, suggesting that signing these documents was really for my own protection. But their timeline betrayed their true motives. If they were genuinely concerned about future medical emergencies, they wouldn't need my signature tonight. "Medical emergencies are exactly why I should involve my own attorney," I said. "Make sure any documents properly protect my interests." Kevin's patience was wearing thin. "Vincent, you're being paranoid. We're family. We want what's best for you." The paranoia accusation was designed to make me doubt my own judgment, feel foolish for questioning their motives. But Marcus's warning had prepared me for exactly this kind of manipulation. "Maybe I am being paranoid," I conceded. "But paranoia sometimes keeps elderly people from being taken advantage of." The direct reference to elder abuse made everyone uncomfortable. They couldn't deny the reality of financial exploitation without seeming defensive. Robert tried a softer approach. "Dad, I know you miss Mom, and change is difficult. But Kevin's been managing your investments successfully. This just makes everything official and legal." The emotional manipulation referenced Eleanor's death and my presumed loneliness, suggesting that resistance to their plan stemmed from grief-induced irrationality rather than legitimate financial caution. "Eleanor would have wanted me to be careful with legal documents," I said quietly. "She would have wanted you to trust your family," Sandra countered. But Eleanor had never fully trusted Sandra, had expressed private concerns about her motivations for marrying Robert. My late wife's instincts about people had always been more accurate than mine. Kevin made one final attempt at persuasion. "Vincent, if you don't sign these documents tonight, you're leaving your family vulnerable. What if something happens to you tomorrow? Robert and Sandra would have no legal authority to protect your assets." The fear-based argument suggested immediate danger, imminent threats that required instant action. But the only immediate threat was their plan to defraud me before morning. "I think I'll take that risk," I said calmly. The room fell silent except for the ticking of Eleanor's grandfather clock. My refusal to sign had created a crisis for their carefully orchestrated plan. They needed my signature tonight to proceed with tomorrow's bank transfers, but I wasn't cooperating with their timeline. Sandra whispered something to Kevin, who nodded grimly. They were shifting to contingency plans, probably more aggressive approaches to securing my compliance. Marcus sensed the growing tension and pressed closer to my side. "Grandpa, I'm scared. Why is everyone so angry?" His innocent observation highlighted the toxic atmosphere they'd created around what they claimed was routine financial planning. Children instinctively recognized when adult behavior felt threatening or wrong. "Nobody's angry, sweetheart," Sandra said quickly, forcing a smile. But Marcus could see through her performance. "Mommy, your voice sounds mad, like when I break something expensive." The comparison was devastatingly accurate. Sandra's frustration at my non-compliance mirrored her anger when Marcus damaged valuable items. Both situations involved loss of something she considered rightfully hers. Kevin collected his documents, clearly frustrated by the evening's failure. "Vincent, I'll leave these papers with you overnight. Perhaps you'll reconsider after sleeping on it." He was hoping I'd change my mind by morning, or possibly planning to return later with different persuasion methods. "Actually, I'd prefer you take them with you," I said. "If I decide I want power of attorney documents, I'll have my own attorney prepare them." Kevin's jaw tightened, but he returned the papers to his briefcase. Their entire scheme was collapsing because they couldn't secure my signature voluntarily. Sandra made one last attempt. "Dad, Vincent, I'm disappointed in how you've handled this evening. Kevin worked hard to help you, and you've been nothing but suspicious and ungrateful. The guilt trip was designed to make me apologize, reconsider my position, possibly agree to sign the documents to restore family harmony. I appreciate Kevin's efforts," I said diplomatically, "but I need to make financial decisions at my own pace." Robert gathered his jacket, signaling their departure was imminent. "Dad, this conversation isn't over. We need to discuss your financial management seriously." The veiled threat suggested they'd pursue other methods to gain control of my assets, possibly through legal proceedings or continued manipulation attempts. "We can discuss it after I've consulted with my attorney," I agreed. As they prepared to leave, I noticed Sandra whispering urgently to Kevin near the front door. They were probably coordinating backup plans, alternative approaches to accessing my money before I could involve outside legal counsel. Marcus hugged me goodbye, whispering quietly, "Grandpa, I'm glad you didn't sign the scary papers." His validation meant everything to me. My 8-year-old grandson understood that something wrong had been attempted tonight, even if he couldn't articulate the legal complexities. After they left, I remained in Eleanor's chair for several minutes, processing what had just occurred.
My own family had attempted to drug and defraud me using manufactured evidence of mental incompetence to justify stealing my life savings. But they'd failed. Marcus's warning had given me time to prepare, and their own words had been recorded throughout the evening. Tomorrow, I'd have all the evidence needed to protect my assets and pursue criminal charges. My phone buzzed with a text from Thomas. "Safe to come inside?" I stepped outside and signaled toward the wooded area where he'd been monitoring the situation with Patricia and James. Within minutes, they appeared at my back door. "Vincent, that was incredible," Patricia said immediately. They documented their entire conspiracy in their own words. The recordings captured admissions of bank coordination, timeline urgency, attempts to impair your judgment, everything we need for prosecution. James was reviewing digital recordings on his equipment. Mrs. Patterson at the bank is going to have some serious explaining to do. Sandra's confirmation of advanced coordination constitutes conspiracy to commit financial fraud. Thomas embraced me warmly. "You handled that perfectly. Never let them pressure you into signing, gathered crucial intelligence, protected yourself completely." The relief was overwhelming. For several hours, I'd been performing the role of confused elderly victim while internally managing a complex counterintelligence operation. The stress had been enormous, but the results were exactly what we'd hoped for. "What happens now?" I asked. Patricia was already organizing her evidence files. "First, we contact federal authorities about the bank employee involvement. Financial institution fraud falls under FBI jurisdiction. Second, we file criminal complaints against Sandra, Kevin, and Robert for attempted elder abuse and conspiracy. Third, we get restraining orders preventing them from accessing your financial accounts." The comprehensive response felt appropriate for their calculated betrayal. They'd planned to destroy my financial security, so they'd face complete legal consequences. "What about Marcus?" I asked. "He's innocent in all this, and he's the one who saved me." "Child Protective Services will probably investigate his home environment," James noted. "Parents who attempt financial fraud against family members aren't typically ideal caregivers." The implications for my grandson were heartbreaking. Marcus might end up in foster care or custody battles because his parents had chosen criminal conspiracy over honest living. But he'd also demonstrated remarkable courage and moral clarity in warning me about their plans. Despite his young age, Marcus had recognized that stealing was wrong and had acted to protect his grandfather. Thomas checked his watch. "It's nearly midnight. Patricia, how quickly can we get legal protections in place?" "Emergency motions can be filed first thing tomorrow morning. I'll have restraining orders and asset protection orders ready by 10 a.m. Vincent's accounts will be frozen against unauthorized access pending investigation." The rapid legal response would prevent Sandra and Kevin from attempting alternative approaches to accessing my money. By tomorrow afternoon, they'd discover that their criminal conspiracy had been thoroughly documented and that law enforcement was already investigating their activities. "There's one more thing," I said. "They mentioned time-sensitive market opportunities, suggested they needed to act quickly on investment decisions. That might have been cover for international transfers or offshore account activity." Patricia nodded grimly. "We'll alert financial intelligence units about potential money laundering. If they've prepared offshore accounts, those can be traced and frozen as well." James was already packing his surveillance equipment. "Vincent, you should probably change your locks tonight, just as a precaution. People who attempt financial fraud sometimes escalate to other criminal activities when their initial plans fail." The suggestion that I might be physically unsafe in my own home was sobering. My family's betrayal could potentially extend beyond financial crime if they became desperate enough. But I'd survived tonight's confrontation, gathered evidence of their conspiracy, and enlisted professional help to protect my assets. Tomorrow would bring legal consequences for their attempted fraud, and Marcus would be safe from parents who'd proven capable of elaborate criminal deception. As Patricia and James departed with their evidence files, Thomas remained behind to help me process the evening's revelations. "Vincent, I know this has been devastating, but you should feel proud of how you handled everything. They could have succeeded in stealing millions of dollars if Marcus hadn't warned you." The praise felt hollow, given the family destruction that had been revealed. 47 years building a business, raising a family, creating something meaningful. And they were ready to steal it all for their own convenience. "Some people choose greed over integrity," Thomas said simply. "But Marcus chose honesty over family loyalty. That tells you something important about his character." My grandson had indeed shown remarkable moral courage. Despite loving his parents, despite being only 8 years old, he'd recognized wrong behavior and taken action to prevent it. Thomas checked his watch. "It's nearly midnight. Patricia, how quickly can we get legal protections in place?" "Emergency motions can be filed first thing tomorrow morning. I'll have restraining orders and asset protection orders ready by 10 a.m. Vincent's accounts will be frozen against unauthorized access pending investigation." The rapid legal response would prevent Sandra and Kevin from attempting alternative approaches to accessing my money. By tomorrow afternoon, they'd discover that their criminal conspiracy had been thoroughly documented and that law enforcement was already investigating their activities. "There's one more thing," I said. "They mentioned time-sensitive market opportunities, suggested they needed to act quickly on investment decisions. That might have been cover for international transfers or offshore account activity." Patricia nodded grimly. "We'll alert financial intelligence units about potential money laundering. If they've prepared offshore accounts, those can be traced and frozen as well." James was already packing his surveillance equipment. "Vincent, you should probably change your locks tonight, just as a precaution. People who attempt financial fraud sometimes escalate to other criminal activities when their initial plans fail." The suggestion that I might be physically unsafe in my own home was sobering. My family's betrayal could potentially extend beyond financial crime if they became desperate enough. But I'd survived tonight's confrontation, gathered evidence of their conspiracy, and enlisted professional help to protect my assets. Tomorrow would bring legal consequences for their attempted fraud, and Marcus would be safe from parents who'd proven capable of elaborate criminal deception. As Patricia and James departed with their evidence files, Thomas remained behind to help me process the evening's revelations. "Vincent, I know this has been devastating, but you should feel proud of how you handled everything. They could have succeeded in stealing millions of dollars if Marcus hadn't warned you." The praise felt hollow, given the family destruction that had been revealed. 47 years building a business, raising a family, creating something meaningful. And they were ready to steal it all for their own convenience. "Some people choose greed over integrity," Thomas said simply. "But Marcus chose honesty over family loyalty. That tells you something important about his character." My grandson had indeed shown remarkable moral courage. Despite loving his parents, despite being only 8 years old, he'd recognized wrong behavior and taken action to prevent it. "I need to make sure Marcus is protected through whatever comes next," I said. "Legal proceedings, custody issues, family disruption. He shouldn't suffer because his parents are criminals." "We'll make sure he's taken care of," Thomas promised. "Good kids deserve good outcomes." As Thomas left and I locked up my house with new security awareness, I reflected on the evening's events. My quiet retirement had been shattered by family betrayal, but I'd also discovered reserves of strength and cunning I hadn't known I possessed. Eleanor would have been proud of how I'd handled the crisis. She'd always said I was tougher than I looked, more capable of protecting myself than people assumed. Tomorrow would bring legal battles, criminal investigations, and probably media attention when the story of attempted elder fraud becomes public. But tonight, I'd won the most important victory by preventing my family from stealing my life's work. The house felt different now, somehow smaller and less secure than before. But it was still my house, my assets were still under my control, and my grandson's courage had saved us both from disaster. In the morning, Sandra and Kevin would discover that their carefully planned fraud had become their own criminal downfall. Justice, as Eleanor always said, had a way of finding people who truly deserved it. The morning sun cast long shadows across my kitchen as I sat with Patricia Walsh and Agent Rebecca Martinez from the FBI Financial Crimes Division. Coffee grew cold in our cups while we reviewed the evidence that would destroy my family's freedom and reputation forever.
Agent Martinez studied the surveillance recordings with professional detachment. Her 20 years investigating financial fraud had apparently immunized her against the shock of family betrayal. "Mr. Harrison, these recordings constitute some of the clearest evidence of conspiracy to commit elder financial abuse I've encountered. Your family essentially confessed their entire scheme while being recorded." Patricia nodded agreement while organizing legal documents across my dining table. Sandra's admission about coordinating with Mrs. Patterson at the bank, Kevin's references to time-sensitive transfers, Marcus's innocent revelations about their conversations, it's a prosecutor's dream case. The irony wasn't lost on me that my grandson's 8th birthday party had become the setting for documenting his parents' criminal conspiracy. Marcus had spent yesterday afternoon playing with new toys while his mother and uncle plotted to drug and defraud his grandfather. "What's the timeline for arrests?" I asked. Agent Martinez checked her tactical watch. "Sandra and Robert are being taken into custody at their apartment in Manhattan right now. Kevin's arrest warrant is being executed at his law office. Mrs. Patterson was arrested when she arrived at the bank this morning." The simultaneous arrests would prevent coordination between conspirators, eliminate opportunities to destroy evidence or flee jurisdiction. After months of planning my financial destruction, they were discovering that law enforcement could act just as swiftly and decisively. My phone buzzed with an incoming call from Robert's number. I showed the screen to Agent Martinez, who nodded for me to answer while she activated recording equipment. "Dad, what the hell is happening?" Robert's voice carried panic and desperation. "FBI agents just arrested Sandra at our apartment. They're saying something about financial fraud and elder abuse. They have a warrant to search everything." The performance of innocent confusion was expertly delivered, but I knew better now. Robert had stood guard during last night's attempted fraud, had pressured me to sign documents, had participated fully in their conspiracy. "I'm sorry to hear about Sandra's troubles," I said calmly. "Her troubles? Dad, they're accusing us of trying to steal your money. They're asking about power of attorney documents and bank coordination. I don't understand what's happening." The feigned ignorance might have worked if I hadn't spent the previous evening listening to his direct participation in their scheme. Robert had encouraged me to trust Kevin, had dismissed my concerns about signing documents, had coordinated their strategy. "Perhaps you should contact an attorney," I suggested. "Dad, please, you have to help us. Tell them this is all a misunderstanding. Sandra and I would never try to hurt you financially. We love you." The desperate plea for help might have moved me yesterday morning, before Marcus's warning revealed their true intentions. But now I understood that their expressions of love had been manipulation tactics designed to lower my defenses. "Robert, did you attempt to have me sign power of attorney documents last night?" Silence stretched across the phone connection. Robert was calculating how much I might know, whether denial was still possible. "Dad, those were just routine financial planning documents. Kevin explained everything. You seemed confused about their purpose." The gaslighting continued even during his arrest crisis. I was supposedly confused rather than appropriately cautious about signing away control of my assets. "I wasn't confused, Robert. I understood exactly what those documents would have allowed you to do." Another pause. Agent Martinez was recording every word, building additional evidence of Robert's participation in the conspiracy. "Dad, I don't know what you think you heard, but Kevin was trying to help organize your finances properly. Everything was legitimate." The lies flowed smoothly despite his desperate circumstances. Robert was maintaining their cover story even while facing federal charges, hoping to minimize legal consequences through continued deception. "Robert, I have recordings of last night's conversation. Sandra's admissions about Mrs. Patterson, Kevin's coordination with the bank, your pressure tactics. Everything was documented." The phone went silent except for background noise of law enforcement activity. Robert was processing the reality that their conspiracy had been exposed through surveillance, that their own words would be used as evidence against them. "Dad, please think about Marcus. He needs his parents. Don't let them destroy our family over a misunderstanding." The manipulation shifted to exploiting my love for Marcus, trying to make me feel responsible for the consequences of their criminal choices. But Marcus had been the one who warned me about their plans, had demonstrated more integrity at age 8 than his parents had shown in years. "Marcus will be fine," I said quietly. "Good children survive bad parents." I ended the call and handed the phone back to Agent Martinez. Robert's desperate attempts at manipulation had provided additional evidence of his guilty knowledge and participation in the fraud conspiracy. Patricia was reviewing custody paperwork. Child Protective Services will be evaluating Marcus's placement options. Given his role in exposing the conspiracy, they're treating him as a victim rather than simply a displaced child. The fact that Marcus might become a ward of the state because his parents were criminals broke my heart. But he'd shown remarkable courage in warning me about their plans, and he deserved protection from people capable of elaborate fraud and deception. Agent Martinez's radio crackled with updates. "All suspects in custody. Kevin Grant is requesting his attorney and refusing to answer questions. Mrs. Patterson is cooperating fully, providing details about document preparation and account coordination. The bank employees' cooperation would expose the full scope of their conspiracy, reveal how they'd planned to legitimize fraudulent transfers through insider assistance." Thomas arrived as the FBI team was packing their equipment. My old business partner looked exhausted from a sleepless night coordinating legal responses, but his expression carried grim satisfaction. "Vincent, the restraining orders are in place. All your accounts are frozen against unauthorized access. Even if they'd somehow completed the fraud before arrest, the money would have been recoverable." The financial protection felt anticlimactic, given that the conspirators were now in federal custody, but it demonstrated how quickly legitimate legal processes could respond to protect elderly victims. Patricia gathered her files methodically. The district attorney's office will be presenting charges to a grand jury within the week. Elder financial abuse, conspiracy to commit fraud, bank fraud, attempting to impair judgment through drugs. They're looking at serious federal time. The drug charges added another layer of criminal liability. Sandra's attempts to slip medication into my coffee constituted assault with intent to facilitate fraud, a felony that carried additional prison sentences. Agent Martinez left final instructions. "Mr. Harrison, you'll probably be contacted by media outlets when this story breaks. Financial fraud involving family members generates significant public interest. We recommend limiting public statements until after trial proceedings." The prospect of media attention was daunting. Our family's private destruction would become public entertainment, a cautionary tale about trusting relatives with financial access. After the law enforcement officials departed, Thomas and I sat in my living room processing the morning's developments. 48 hours ago, I'd been a trusting grandfather enjoying his grandson's birthday party. Now I was the victim in a federal criminal case against my own family. "Vincent, how are you holding up through all this?" The question was harder to answer than I'd expected. Relief at preventing the fraud mixed with grief at discovering my family's betrayal. Pride in exposing their conspiracy battled with sadness at the family destruction that would follow. "I keep thinking about Eleanor," I said finally. "She never fully trusted Sandra, always felt something was wrong about her. I dismissed her concerns as jealousy or overprotectiveness." Thomas nodded knowingly. Eleanor was an excellent judge of character. She probably sensed Sandra's opportunistic nature from the beginning. My late wife had indeed possessed remarkable instincts about people. Her quiet reservations about Sandra's sudden interest in family finances, her concerns about Kevin's increasing involvement in my business decisions, all the warning signs I'd attributed to age-related caution or feminine intuition. What happens to Marcus now? Patricia's working with Child Protective Services to explore kinship placement options. You're obviously the most stable family member, and Marcus clearly trusts you completely. The possibility of becoming Marcus's guardian at age 72 was both daunting and appealing. My grandson had demonstrated loyalty and courage that his parents lacked, deserved stability and honest guidance through the trauma they'd created. "Do you think I'm too old to raise an 8-year-old? Thomas smiled for the first time in days. "Vincent, you just outmaneuvered a sophisticated criminal conspiracy, documented federal crimes, and protected millions in assets. I think you can handle elementary school homework and soccer practice." The afternoon brought a call from Jennifer Walsh, Patricia's associate handling the custody evaluation. Her voice carried professional warmth mixed with urgency. "Mr. Harrison, I've completed preliminary interviews with Marcus about his home environment. His testimony about overhearing his parents' conspiracy plans is remarkably detailed and consistent. But more importantly, he's expressed clear preference for living with you rather than entering foster care." The news that Marcus wanted to stay with me felt like the first entirely positive development since this crisis began. What does that process involve? Emergency custody hearing tomorrow morning. Given the criminal charges against his parents and his role in exposing the conspiracy, the court will likely approve temporary guardianship pending full evaluation. The rapid legal timeline reflected the severity of his parents' crimes and the court's recognition that Marcus needed immediate stability. That evening, I drove to the Children's Services facility where Marcus was being temporarily housed. The institutional setting, with its cheerful but sterile decorations, couldn't mask the sadness of children separated from families through crisis or abuse. Marcus ran to me the moment I entered the visiting room. "Grandpa Vincent, are Mommy and Daddy really going to jail?" The directness of his question demanded honest response, despite his young age. "They made some very bad choices, buddy, choices that broke important laws." "Because they tried to steal your money." His matter-of-fact understanding of their crime was both impressive and heartbreaking. Marcus grasped moral concepts that his parents had apparently abandoned. "Yes, because they tried to steal my money and lie about it." Marcus considered this information with 8-year-old seriousness. "Grandpa, I'm glad I told you about their plan. Stealing is always wrong, even from family." The moral clarity in his statement reminded me why I'd fought so hard to protect him from his parents' criminal influence. Marcus understood right from wrong instinctively, possessed integrity that couldn't be taught or manufactured. "You did exactly the right thing, Marcus. You were very brave to tell me the truth." "Are you going to take care of me now?" The hope in his voice was unmistakable. Despite the trauma of seeing his parents arrested, Marcus felt safer with his grandfather than in the foster care system. "If the court says it's okay, would you like to live with me?" Marcus nodded eagerly. "Can I have the bedroom that looks out on Grandma Eleanor's garden? And can we read adventure books together every night?" The simple requests revealed his desire for normalcy and security after experiencing his parents' betrayal and arrest. A quiet bedroom, familiar stories, the comfort of routine with someone he trusted completely. "We can arrange all of that," I promised. The custody hearing the next morning proceeded with surprising efficiency. Judge Catherine Morrison reviewed the case file with obvious concern for Marcus's welfare above all other considerations. "Mr. Harrison, you're requesting emergency guardianship of your grandson, whose parents have been charged with federal conspiracy to commit elder financial abuse against you specifically?" "Yes, Your Honor. Marcus was the person who warned me about their plans, potentially saving me from significant financial loss. He deserves protection from people capable of such calculated deception."
Judge Morrison studied Marcus, who sat quietly beside Jennifer Walsh in his best school clothes. "Marcus, do you understand what's happening with your parents?"
Marcus nodded solemnly. They tried to steal Grandpa's money, and now they're in trouble with the police. How do you feel about living with your grandfather? I want to live with Grandpa Vincent. He's nice to me and doesn't lie about important things. The simple statement carried devastating implications about his home environment with Sandra and Robert. Children who specifically valued honesty had probably experienced significant deception. Mr. Harrison, you're 72 years old. Are you prepared for the responsibilities of raising a young child? The question was fair given my age and the unexpected circumstances. Your Honor, I raised my own son successfully, built a business, maintained a stable marriage for 50 years. Marcus and I have a strong relationship, and I have the financial resources to provide excellent care. Patricia presented character references, financial documentation, and Marcus's own statements about preferring to live with me rather than entering foster care. Judge Morrison made her decision with judicial efficiency. Emergency guardianship granted to Vincent Harrison pending full custody evaluation. Marcus will be placed with his grandfather immediately. The legal victory felt overwhelming. In less than 72 hours, I'd prevented a financial fraud, exposed a criminal conspiracy, seen the perpetrators arrested, and gained custody of my grandson. Marcus hugged me tightly as we left the courthouse. "Grandpa, are we going home now?" The word home carried new meaning. My Victorian house would no longer be the quiet refuge of a widowed retiree, but the active household of an 8-year-old boy discovering his place in the world. 3 weeks later, I sat in the gallery of Federal District Court watching Sandra, Robert, and Kevin face sentencing for their conspiracy convictions. Mrs. Patterson had testified against them in exchange for reduced charges, providing detailed evidence of their fraud planning and bank coordination. Marcus sat beside me, having insisted on attending to see justice completed. His parents had each received 5 years in federal prison for elder abuse, financial fraud, and conspiracy charges. Kevin faced additional sanctions from the State Bar Association that would end his legal career permanently. Sandra looked across the courtroom toward us as marshals prepared to escort her to federal custody. Her expression mixed regret with resentment, as if she blamed me for the consequences of her own criminal choices. Robert maintained his pose of wounded innocence even during sentencing, claiming he'd been manipulated by Sandra and Kevin into participating in their scheme. But the recordings clearly showed his active coordination and pressure tactics. Kevin's downfall was perhaps the most complete. Federal prison, disbarment, destruction of his legal practice, financial ruin from legal fees and restitution orders. His attempt to defraud a family member had cost him everything he'd worked years to build. Judge Morrison addressed the defendants before final sentencing. Elder financial abuse represents one of society's most calloused crimes. You exploited family trust to attempt theft from a vulnerable senior citizen. Your actions were calculated, systematic, and showed complete disregard for the victim's welfare. The judicial condemnation felt appropriate for their elaborate betrayal. They hadn't acted impulsively or made mistakes in judgment. They'd planned systematically to destroy my financial security for their personal gain. As we left the courthouse, Marcus asked the question I'd been dreading. "Grandpa, will I ever see Mommy and Daddy again?" The honest answer required acknowledging painful realities. Someday, when you're older and they've served their sentences, you might choose to have contact with them, but that will be your decision to make. Marcus considered this seriously. "Do you think they'll be sorry for what they did?" The question revealed his hope for parental redemption, a natural desire to believe his mother and father could change and become worthy of his love again. "I hope they'll learn from their mistakes," I said carefully, "but right now, what matters is building our life together." That evening, I read adventure stories to Marcus in Eleanor's former sewing room, which had become his bedroom overlooking the garden she'd loved. His favorite tales involved brave kids who exposed adult wrongdoing, heroes who chose honesty despite personal cost. "Grandpa Vincent, do you think I'm like the kids in these stories?" The comparison was remarkably accurate. Marcus had indeed shown courage in exposing adult criminal behavior, had chosen truth over family loyalty when justice required it. "You're exactly like those heroes, buddy. You saw something wrong and took action to stop it, even though it was scary." Marcus smiled with quiet satisfaction before drifting toward sleep. "Grandpa, I'm glad I live with you now. You make me feel safe." His simple statement summarized everything I'd fought to achieve through this ordeal. Marcus felt safe because he lived with someone who valued honesty, who protected him from people capable of deception and betrayal, who would never exploit his trust for personal gain. 6 months later, my life had settled into rhythms I hadn't experienced since Robert's childhood decades earlier. School pickups and homework supervision, weekend adventures and bedtime stories, the daily joys and challenges of raising an intelligent, curious boy. Marcus thrived in the stability and honesty of our household. His grades improved, his confidence grew, and he developed friendships with neighborhood children whose parents appreciated his mature perspective on right and wrong. The legal proceedings had concluded with complete victory. My assets were fully protected, the conspirators were serving federal sentences, and Marcus was legally my ward pending final adoption proceedings when he turned 9. Sometimes I wondered what Eleanor would think of our transformed life. Her quiet house had become filled with the sounds of childhood again. Her garden was explored daily by an adventurous boy who reminded me remarkably of his father at that age. But mostly, I felt grateful for the warning that had saved us both. Marcus's innocent courage had prevented financial disaster and exposed the true character of people I'd trusted completely. Standing in Eleanor's garden on a spring evening, watching Marcus practice baseball throws against the garage door, I reflected on the strange justice of our situation. His parents' attempt to steal my money had resulted in them losing everything, while Marcus and I had gained something precious through surviving their betrayal together. The 8-year-old boy who'd whispered his warning at a birthday party had become the center of my world, the reason I faced each day with purpose and joy. His parents had planned to take my money, but instead they'd given me something far more valuable. They'd given me Marcus, and through him, a reason to be grateful for growing old with honor intact and family love honestly earned. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.